Uh, Thanks, Ed. So, hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the third meeting of the State Implementation Technical Advisory Group. And my name is Liepa Bracilite. I'm a senior program manager at the National Association of State Energy Officials. If you haven't heard of us, we're the only national nonprofit dedicated to all 56 states and territory energy offices. We serve as a resource for and about the state and territory energy offices. We facilitate peer learning and consensus building among states. And we work on a wide variety of energy topics, including buildings, transportation, and electricity generation, as an example. So here it's a review of today's agenda. After introductions, we have two great speakers today who will talk about state code collaboratives, and I'll describe their background a little bit more later. After their presentations, we'll have an audience Q&A and breakout sessions to understand a little bit more and discuss state code collaboratives, how they could be useful in statewide code implementation and potentially mitigating some of the code challenges that we've been discussing in the previous two meetings. And then we'll go over wrap up and next steps in our next meeting. Here's a quick overview of Ed and I. We are leading this state implementation tag. We're both on the buildings team at NASEO, and we work on energy codes and many other building policies. And as a reminder, this tag, of course, is part of the National Energy Codes Collaborative, which is led by ACEEE. And the goal of the National Energy Codes Collaborative is to establish a nationwide network that empowers states and jurisdictions to effectively implement energy codes, drive innovation, community engagement, and capacity building. So again, just reviewing from previous meetings, the main goals of this tag is to support state and local agencies with energy code implementation, explore solutions to common code implementation challenges, and at the end of the tag, the organizers will create a collection of resources based on the meeting series takeaways and recommendations. And this tag is open to all interested building and energy code stakeholders, especially local and state agencies that support energy code implementation. This is not meant to be a webinar. It's meant to be an active working group. And we meet roughly every other month, but occasionally that might differ. Some basic ground rules for this tag and other tags is to focus on energy code implementation collaboration, be respectful, no commercialization, make sure we all share the floor and don't monopolize conversations, but we also want to have some engagement and hear your thoughts on these discussions. Here are some notes from previous meetings where we discussed some of the main code implementation challenges, the potential solutions and actions that this tag can take. We won't go over this now. This is just a refresher slide. And we're going to share these slides later, so feel free to look at that then. So diving now into the topic of state energy code collaboratives. And there's not one way to have a state energy code collaborative. It's basically a forum for energy code stakeholders from around the state to discuss topics related to code implementation and adoption. But how these actually look like can vary drastically from state to state and between regions. They could vary in frequency, in formality, in goals, and other factors. So today's speakers includes Adam Berry. He's the Senior Program Manager at the Colorado Energy Office. We also have Cornelia Wu, the Senior Manager of Codes and Standards in the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. Unfortunately, Maggie Kelly-Riggins can't make it today. She's the Senior Program Manager at the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. So I will now change the slides. And I'll give the mic to Adam Berry.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Leipa. As she mentioned, I'm Adam Berry. I'm a senior program manager for building energy codes at the Colorado Energy Office. And so my role largely involves overseeing both the state's development and adoption, as you will kind of see in a bit, a little bit of quasi-adoption at the state level for Colorado of updated energy codes, and then also implementation of a number of programs around supporting energy codes. Next slide. So just looking at Colorado's Code Collaborative here, just a little bit of background on where it came from and what we do. This Code Collaborative was convened in 2010, and it has been active at periods of time and inactive at other periods of time. So it's not been operating continuously through that time, but it has been kind of more utilized, especially recently, as some of our energy code landscape has changed here in Colorado. The Code Collaborative is largely focused on energy codes, but it also does look at and discuss other aspects of energy and decarbonization goals and how that relates to code. So an example of that is the electrical code and how that intersects with electrification and decarbonization in buildings. As I said, the Code Collaborative has become more active in the last 3 or 4 years in response to some legislation that was passed in Colorado around driving more statewide focus, advanced energy codes. And then really the mission of this group, which as I will talk about a little bit, leans more into the less formal group structure of code collaboratives, as Leipa was kind of explaining. But the group really intent here is to coordinate and collaborate on energy code and code related decarbonization, and also to drive energy cost savings for Coloradans so through adoption and implementation of energy codes. Next slide. So understanding what does the code look like, or the collaborative look like, and what does participation look like? So as you can see there on the slide, there's pretty significant and broad stakeholder participation in this collaborative. So the Energy Office and SWEEP, which is our regional RIO here in the southwest part of the country, have been coordinating the implementation of this collaborative for the last few years. And we also get participation from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, which involves all of our programs and efforts relating to local governments in the state, local building department staff, utilities, Xcel Energy, which is our largest investor-owned utility here in Colorado, also operates a number of energy code programs and is pretty active in engagement with the state on energy codes. And then we also have circuit rider and energy code training and technical experts that participate in these meetings, and also industry professionals. So design professionals, contractors, builders, everyone involved in actually implementing the code. And so historically, this collaborative has really been focused largely on how to drive leading jurisdictions in Colorado who are wanting to go, pretty advanced, make pretty big advancements in energy codes, and how to support them in doing that. And over time, we have realized that, that's great, but there's a lot of focus that is needed also on how do we bring up jurisdictions who may not be as progressive when it comes to the adoption and implementation of codes, and how do we support them as well through this initiative. And also really trying to grow participation from historically underrepresented communities, including a lot of our rural communities here in Colorado. A lot of our code engagement has historically been focused on our very urban areas in the Denver metro area, and along the Front Range of Colorado. And we have recognized that there is a lot of need for engagement as well with our rural and underrepresented and underserved communities. So we are working to try to expand participation from those communities as well. Next slide. So what are the goals of the collaborative? I think these are probably similar to the goals of most collaboratives, which kind of is that central goal of creating and implementing greater and more equitable adoption and enforcement of codes, whether you're in a state where the code is adopted and enforced at the state level, or whether you're like Colorado and your home rule and the code is adopted and enforced locally. I think that most code collaboratives generally share this goal of really driving adoption and implementation of codes locally, or at the state level. And there's really kind of four buckets that we see our conversations and our efforts fall into. One of those certainly is providing technical assistance and code drafting support to local governments. So as local governments are considering adopting new codes or updating and amending their codes, we provide technical assistance and resources to help them do that, and how we can coordinate and make those resources more effective. Um, Training kind of follows along a similar line as jurisdictions across Colorado are updating newer codes, many of whom have not updated codes over several cycles and are, making a jump from perhaps the 2006 or the 2009 IECC all the way to the 2021 IECC. We see significant challenges and knowledge gaps there. And so, coordinating training and providing training that is going to help those folks who are implementing that code update to be successful in doing so. The third category is really gathering data and research on codes. This is something that we have often lacked, especially when it comes to local considerations for code adoption and implementation, understanding what the impacts of codes are, both from a cost perspective as well as a benefits and energy savings and emissions reductions perspective. And so we're really trying to gather, different approaches and different methods for getting data and research put together that will help inform local adoption and implementation of codes, and hopefully make us more successful in getting those codes moved forward across the state. And then finally, the last bucket is really looking at communication and messaging. How are we talking about energy codes? How are we working with communities to help them understand how codes can benefit their communities, and really, addressing different communities where they are. Some communities are really focused on climate action, and that's great. Some communities are really focused on saving their communities money, and that's also great. And there are different aspects that energy codes have that can benefit all of these communities and help address all of the different concerns and individual priorities that they might have. And so figuring out, how we can be developing that communication and messaging to those communities and helping them achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve. Next slide. So looking at, as I mentioned, Colorado's home rule, and we have many different jurisdictions. We track, the State Energy Office tracks over 300 jurisdictions that each have the authority to adopt and implement codes themselves. And every single one of those jurisdictions historically has had a unique approach and strategy for doing that. There hasn't really been a lot of consistency. There hasn't really been a lot of collaboration. And so I think really one of the main focuses of our code collaborative in Colorado is how we actually promote more of that consistency and more of that engagement across communities throughout the state, because I think what we have recognized is that many communities have similar needs, have similar challenges, and we don't all need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to code adoption and code implementation. Many of the same solutions that will work in one community will work in another community. And it certainly makes it easier and more equitable when we have consistent codes adopted across jurisdictions, as well as consistent enforcement and implementation of those codes. Next slide. And so benefits of the code collaborative are, I think, many of these I would say are probably relatively obvious, but they really do offer opportunities to engage with key stakeholders on code adoption and implementation. And that includes cross-jurisdictional and cross-sectoral strategy development and learning. So, we can engage with the building industry who is actually implementing the codes in construction. We can engage with local governments who are implementing the enforcement and compliance with those codes, and engage with stakeholders, maybe environmental stakeholders or others that actually really care about driving energy savings and emissions reductions. And bring all of those people into a room and have, develop strategies about how to move forward. There's a lot of opportunity for relationship building as well. It's very easy, especially in a home rule state where you have all of these disparate stakeholders and disparate communities to really work within silos. And so this code collaborative really does offer the opportunity for building relationships across sectors and across jurisdictions. It helps everybody identify common needs and interests, understanding where we all have priorities and understanding where we can all collectively work together to move the needle forward. And then finally, identifying where there may be financial or technical resources that would promote consistency across our communities, and how we can align those or pool those resources together. Next slide. And then just a last little bit here is talking about, what are some of the challenges that collaboratives may encounter. And these are just a few that we have encountered in Colorado. And some of these may be as a result of the fact that our collaborative, again, is a little bit more on the informal side. But I think these are still challenges that collaboratives can deal with across the board. Variable participation by stakeholders. Everyone is really busy right now. There's a lot of funding to implement. There's a lot of, especially in Colorado and a lot of other states across the country, there's a lot of construction happening. And so getting participation from all the stakeholders that you want to have in the room can be challenging. And given, the fact that we're talking about a pretty wide and diverse group of stakeholders, it also can be really challenging at times to identify common goals and approaches. There are certain folks in the industry who have different priorities perhaps than environmental activists and state agencies and local governments. And so identifying common interests and really trying to drive strategies that address those interests is not always easy. Having robust and consistent leadership and staff time to shepherd this process is certainly challenging as well. And that's one thing that I think has been a reason why Colorado's collaborative has stayed more on the informal side, is that there has been challenges between SWEEP and the Energy Office over time to maintain like consistent contributions to this process. And so the more dedicated staff time and resources that you can have to these collaboratives certainly can help make it more consistent and make it more reliable over time. And then the last is just, how you make sure you're taking actions out of the conversations. How do you actually make the conversations that you have turn into real life progress and not just sit into an echo chamber where we're all talking about these great ideas, but then the ideas die there. So essentially turning the talk into action. So those are all challenges that I think our collaborative has faced, and other collaboratives probably have faced as well. You'll hear more from Cornelia about maybe how they've addressed some of these in the Northeast, but happy to take any questions following Cornelia's presentation, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, Adam. That was great to hear. I will now change the slides. Cornelia, you can take it away.
Thank you, Leopa. Hello, everybody. I'm Cornelia Wu, Senior Manager of Codes and Standards at Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, or NEEP. And we are one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations, or RIOs, that together cover the country. And we cover 13 states from Maine down to West Virginia, including the District of Columbia. So I'll be focusing on 3 state collaboratives: Massachusetts, Maine, and New Jersey. And then also a little bit of a sneak peek at the National Rural Codes Collaborative. So starting with Massachusetts, next slide, please. So the Massachusetts Net Zero Building Coalition, it's an assembly of elected and appointed municipal officials, building industry professionals, including architects, engineers, developers, and also nonprofit organizations such as Sierra Club. And this has been facilitated by NEEP for a number of years now. While it has as part of its mission, and its name, Net Zero Building, we've talked about a large number of issues, and in recent years have been focused very strongly on the stretch and specialized energy codes in Massachusetts. So meetings are monthly, about 1 hour each month, and volunteers participate on an ad hoc basis. There are about 40 to 50 members, and a core group of very active people attend almost every meeting, and that really helps us keep momentum. We have at times, times that the stretch and specialized codes were being drafted, we had a technical subcommittee of about 8 to 12 people that were also meeting separately once a month to talk about more technical aspects of the code. And we've really focused on facilitation, mobilizing experts who otherwise wouldn't see each other regularly. And we are very grateful that people make the time every month to attend. And we do hear every time people saying thank you for having this forum for all of these different people to be able to discuss their concerns together. As an independent code collaborative, not funded by the state, we are funded as part of a larger grant by the Barr Foundation in New England. That has given us a chance to basically push the Department of Energy Resources in Massachusetts on the code language. So starting in 2021, they began to revise the stretch code, which has existed in Massachusetts since 2009. And they developed a specialized stretch code, what is called the Municipal Opt-in Specialized Code, which is essentially a more stringent version of the stretch code. And in 2022, the straw proposal was released, and for public feedback, we were able to draft public comments and share them and obtain more than 300 signatories, including elected representatives of nearly 60 cities and towns. For reference, in a state as small as Massachusetts, that's about 40% of the cities and towns in the state. And we provided a number of detailed recommendations, especially since we had a number of architects, engineers, code specialists as part of the collaborative. We continue to submit public comments as the stretch and specialized codes are continuing to be revised due to things architects and engineers and building code officials are encountering, as it's being used, as whether or not the modeling metrics are correct, things like that we're encountering. And as we have the professionals in our coalition, we're able to pinpoint very specific issues that we feel might otherwise undermine other jurisdictions signing on. Massachusetts was, I believe, the first state in the country to have a stretch code, and out of about 350 communities, 300 are on either the stretch or the specialized. About 40 are on the specialized code. Going back to the net zero question, the specialized code was conceived as a way to net zero, but because it did not ban fossil fuels, it does not claim to be a net zero building code. So that is something where the coalition is able to engage with DOER about moving forward, what's in the climate plan of the state versus what's in the energy code of the state. And so this has been a very active coalition. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've been covering the code specifically. The stretch and opt-in specialized codes adopted the 2021 IECC ahead of the base. The base, as I mentioned, only covers about 50 communities because the other 300 are on the stretch versions. And the base was only just upgraded to 2021 IECC a few weeks ago, whereas the stretch and specialized have been operating under that for some time now. We've also been discussing embodied carbon initiatives, the municipal fossil fuel-free pilot, which involves 10 communities in Massachusetts, where there is a fossil fuel ban for new construction and building performance standards. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the Maine Energy Code Collaborative meets quarterly. It does consist of a similar mix of members, state legislature, environmental groups, nonprofits, also consulting firms, utilities, real estate agents, passive house, HERS raters, and design professionals. One of these important things that we found that the members appreciate is that because the monthly code board meetings and the energy tag meetings are open for the public to attend, but many people cannot attend them, including people who are affiliated with various local jurisdictions. Reporting out that news has been useful to people just to keep up with what's happening and reviewing and discussing pending code language, both the base and the stretch code. Right now, Maine has just released their base code based on the 2021 IECC and their stretch code provisions. So we're in the middle of circulating public comments through the code collaborative for submission. And then in addition, and this is true of both Massachusetts and Maine, we found that there's some fluid time at the end for people to announce educational opportunities, training, things like that, that members, again, who otherwise aren't able to speak on a regular basis can share with each other. And we find that also people are able to use the email chains to announce things that way too. Next slide. And we can move one more slide forward. So the New Jersey Energy Code Collaborative has not launched yet. We're hoping to launch that by the end of the year. And the purpose is based on an energy master plan that was signed by an executive order back in 2023. So New Jersey's climate targets to achieve 100% clean energy by 2035 through energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy sources. And so together with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and Rutgers, NEEP drafted a living document, which is the New Jersey Zero Energy Buildings Roadmap. And it's by living document, we actually published on our webpage back about 2 years ago, a draft of it that was publicly circulated. We had about 10 listening sessions on it. And at that time, we had convened a code collaborative, which provided a lot of feedback. While we were basically redrafting it based on feedback, that code collaborative went on hiatus. And we are now reconvening it in the years that have passed. There have been staff personnel changes, a number of things. So it's conceived as a new code collaborative, the previous one to help provide feedback into the roadmap, and the new energy code collaborative to implement the roadmap. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the purpose of the Code Collaborative is to implement this roadmap and to make sure that we can improve the administration, enforcement, and compliance of the energy policies of the state, in particular, as laid out by the Energy Master Plan. Next slide. So the way that this is set up, and unlike the Massachusetts Net Zero Building Coalition, which was funded by an outside foundation, this is funded by the state itself. So it's, again, NEEP, Rutgers, and the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities as the project facilitators. We built an advisory group consisting of the New Jersey Governor's Office, the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, which is the code adopting and enforcement body, the DEP, College of New Jersey, Sustainable Jersey, PSE&G, the utility, and the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. That advisory group is automatically a part of the Energy Code Collaborative, and in the Code Collaborative itself, we added building design and construction industry members, such as architects, engineers, contractors, also labor and environmental organizations, and municipal staff. And then the Code Collaborative itself will have a number of subcommittees looking at code adoptions, code amendments, possible stretch code, which does not exist in New Jersey right now, code compliance and enforcement, workforce development, other things. And one of the reasons that we do need the subcommittees is that, for instance, for stretch code or for building performance standards, which also does not exist, it's very, very likely that legislation would be required. So each subcommittee would have a variety of experts looking at what would be necessary to implement various portions of the Zero Energy Buildings Roadmap. A number of things which, as I mentioned, either require a lot of discussion, public comment, and/or legislation to make these things happen. Next slide. And then finally, the National Rural Codes Collaborative. If you can move forward one more slide, please. So this is a second round RECI project. The core members are 10 states ranging from Maine to Montana to Texas, and the Tribal Homeownership Coalition of the Southwest. So unlike the 3 states that are in our region, this is national. All of the RIOs are participating, and we'll be identifying local, national, regional, state, and local stakeholders familiar with rural energy-related barriers. So this is a situation where each RIO knows their own region and will be helping to identify the stakeholders. As you see from the New Jersey chart that I showed yesterday, it's really important to make sure that the invitations go out to people who are whether practitioners or code officials or leading jurisdictions. And one of the things that is new for this code collaborative is that we included in our project budget compensation for local stakeholders, especially people who are not participating in the context of their job. And that is a way, especially in rural communities, which are often disadvantaged, of making sure we do have the proper community input. And so the second phase of this project will involve implementing strategies in 10 pilot communities. So it's really important in the first phase to convene this codes collaborative and make sure that we are getting the necessary input to identify these strategies and implement them correctly and successfully in phase 2. Next slide. And that is my contact information. I believe they will be sharing this slide deck. So I will I will stop there, and I'll send it back to you, Liepa.
Great. Thank you, Cornelia. That was super informative. So before we move into the breakout rooms, I wanted to open it in case there's any questions from the audience. Did we want to learn a little bit more about any of the topics the speakers presented? And I don't see any hands raised, so I had a small question. If there's a local jurisdiction that's interested in potentially starting a collaborative in their region or their state, what would you say are the first few steps that they should take in potentially deciding whether to have a collaborative or starting the collaborative itself?
Sorry, the question was about whether a local jurisdiction was interested in putting together a code collaborative?
As a potential part of the collaborative, yeah. To collaborate with other jurisdictions in the state.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is making sure that you're identifying stakeholders. I think a lot of the effort, once things get going, there's preparing for the meetings and the actual running of the meetings to keep things going. But I think a lot of the thought process and a lot of the effort is at the front end. So for New Jersey, there was a lot of time spent making sure we were identifying people and doing proper outreach to get all the different voices that we needed. So I think that's probably the number one thing for, starting a new code collaborative.
Great, thanks. In that case, oh, Laurel?
Sorry, trying to turn my camera on. Hi, I have a quick question for you, Cornelia. I know you mentioned that the Massachusetts Collaborative is funded privately by the Bar Foundation, and then I think the New Jersey is funded by the state. I know you said the New Jersey rollout hasn't really kicked off yet, but how is capacity kind of different and constrained by who's funding it?
I think the New Jersey, because it does involve the Board of Public Utilities and also Rutgers in addition to NEEP. I think there is more capacity, and I think in some ways it's more targeted towards the zero energy buildings roadmap. Whereas in Massachusetts, there has been, for instance, expansion of the original, looking at zero energy buildings. When we saw that the specialized code essentially had a mixed fuel pathway, that sort of expanded what the group was looking at, because it meant, engaging with the stretch code and the specialized codes, neither of which are truly net zero energy codes, but, it's sort of engaging with the reality of what's at hand, where it's with and trying to influence how that code was written and continues to evolve. Whereas with New Jersey, I think it's looking at the roadmap, which is going out to 2035, and seeing how to implement that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. If any other questions come up, feel free to either raise your hand or, better yet, put it in the chat. In that case, we will move on to the next item in the agenda. So we will then move on to the breakout sessions, and we want to learn more about potentially your experience with state code collaboratives. Obviously, you're here, you're participating in the National Energy Codes Collaborative, so we're assuming you're interested in code collaboratives. And we wanted to hear what's your experience. Have you been part of one, or maybe there isn't one in your state? So I will paste the questions in the chat. Moment. Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks for your time. Okay. I put the questions in the chat, and I will now open the breakout rooms. Ed and I and Alex will be co-facilitators. Okay, Ed, I think I might need your help. Seems like it's not assigning once again. Okay,
And two or three for me.
2 for you.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.